adopt that model
Which is called?
rather than adopting a model which doesn't
Sure.
have any evidence to
Sure.
support it,
And what's that
apart
called?
from a book or what's that called?
What's that called?
Being sensible, being logical.
No, it's not. It's actually called methodological naturalism.
No, well, no. Hold on. Methodological naturalism. There's two types, and your friend.
So you were supposed, but you know, well, hang on a second. You were supposed to challenge the assumption, not verify it. You just verified it.
In what way?
You said I misrepresented, and these assumptions aren't there. But you just showed me yourself that assumption exists.
No, I didn't assume like there can be no such thing as magic. What I said was that the model that kind of human beings kind of were reproduced and like came about via reproduction rather than something magical or some kind of being's divine intervention or divine providence or molding people out of magical clay or that sort of thing. That there's much more evidence to support the model that human beings came about via.
So what you're doing
like,
is this.
natural processes.
What you're doing is this. You're conflating methodological naturalism with philosophical naturalism.
No,
You are. Shall I tell you why? Because scientists, here's what they do. When they are looking at a particular subject, a patient, they put on the lenses of methodological naturalism. They assume there's no soul. They assume the brain is simply the mind the mind is simply the brain at work. This is known as methodological naturalism. Now, philosophical naturalism, the belief that nature is all that there's out there, you're conflating these two. Okay, now let's go back to what I said, and which is why I explained it. I wanted you to challenge it, but you haven't challenged it so far. I said that human chimpanzee ancestry or anything in the tree of life is still based upon these four assumptions. First thing I said is methodological naturalism, and so far you've only verified it. Not only have you verified it,
I've said that's it. No, I've not like taken it.
you've also shown that a common mistake which is done is you've confused that with philosophical naturalism.
No, I haven't. Like I'm aware of like kind of the difference between methodological.
Fantastic.
Naturalism.
So James,
I've said that like one model has evidence to support it. The other model has no evidence.
No. That's an assumption. That's an assumption.
Okay. So what's the evidence?
Okay, sure.
Kind of,
Perfect. Let's stop there for a second. Now what's happened so far is this. You've agreed, scientists agree to methodological naturalism. Now you're asking you're making an argument for philosophical naturalism. Now,
I'm not. No.
You're saying why is creationism better than this, which is philosophical naturalism? Well, you're not saying that.
No, but like, so the way I would understand, if I said I'm a philosophical naturalist, then I would be asserting that nothing in nature occurs through supernatural means or divine intervention. I'd just be kind of taking that as an assumption, rather than what I'm doing is I'm kind of looking at two different models for how we came about. One model which has kind of evidence supporting
Okay,
now,
sir, what you're doing now is you're going beyond the remit of science.
Okay. Yeah,
so let's leave that discussion about whether naturalism or supernaturalism is the best worldview to the end. All I was saying was methodological naturalism is an assumption in science.
Well, no, it sounded like what you said was that philosophical naturalism is an assumption in science.
No.
Okay.
So we agree there.
Okay,
now, here's the thing. Even secular mainstream atheist philosophers of science and evolutionary biologists agree that methodological naturalism and philosophical naturalism are not the same thing, and naturalism itself, philosophical naturalism, is an act of faith.
Yeah.
For example, I'm sure you've heard of Michael Ruse, very prominent philosopher of science. This is what he says as well. Now let's move on to the other assumptions, because we know methodological naturalism is there. The other assumption is natural selection.
But hold on. I'm sorry, but like, kind of, by calling it an assumption, there's an implication there that it's not based on evidence. Whereas, like, in fact, kind of adopting the model that kind of human beings arose just by biological processes, rather than is supported by evidence more than the model that human beings arose by divine intervention.
Okay, assuming.
So why are we calling it an assumption?
Okay.
When it's really kind of just a sensible kind of approach, like which is more sensible.
Sure. Now what you're doing is this. You're again doing something in which you are conflating philosophical and methodological by saying the success of methodological leads to philosophical.
But
that's what you said.
No, because I'm not saying that I'm not saying we should claim it. Because if I was assuming that,
Didn't you say methodology?
If I was assuming philosophical naturalism, then I'd assume there can never be any divine intervention. Okay, I haven't done that. What I said is that in terms of which model is more supported when it comes to the arrival of human beings.
Sir,
I have weighed up the evidence, and one model is more well supported.
Look, the discussion.
That doesn't mean I'm ruling out any divine intervention in the future. I'm not being a philosophical
the discussion about whether naturalism or supernaturalism best explains human beings, morality, consciousness, everything else, design, we can talk about in the end. For now, let's stick to these 4 assumptions. So methodological naturalism is there.
But it isn't a different question, though.
It is a similar question, but what we're speaking about here is this.
It relates very specifically to whether scientists are assuming that there can't be any divine intervention.
Sir, methodological naturalism is a working assumption in science. This is according to the standard understanding of all philosophers of science. If you don't disagree with that, you can. I'm just saying it's an assumption there. Now, 1 second, sir. Natural selection is another assumption because no amount of similarities in the world is enough to establish that you have common ancestry. You have to have a mechanism. Do you disagree or agree with that?
Can you repeat that, sorry?
So, no amount of similarities between human beings or chimpanzees, human beings or pigs, genetically or anatomically, are enough to establish common ancestry. You have to show a mechanism.
Yeah, that's definitely desirable, having a mechanism.
Not desirable. You actually have to have it necessarily.
Yeah. Okay, that's sensible.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's also an assumption that natural selection leads A to B.
No, it's not an assumption because that also has evidence supporting it.
Sir, this is the way that science works. You begin off with an assumption or hypothesis, then you try and verify it, correct?
Yeah, but can we call this a hypothesis? Because assumption has the implication that you're kind of leaping to a conclusion that's just based on a gut feeling or faith rather than based on a logical inference.
I agree.
Okay,
but I agree.
Let's say it's a logical inference.
No, but sir,
natural selection is a mechanism which
no.
Look,
we have some good reasons for this. Number one, there is a lot of propaganda about natural selection and how efficient it is, which is total nonsense.
No, what you're referring to are kind of minor disagreements between kind of biologists who would all agree that there is ample evidence that humans and chimps share a common ancestor.
No, but sir,
you're pointing to like slight differences.
2 points here. Number one. Human beings and chimpanzees, you cannot claim common ancestry unless you have a mechanism. You already agreed about that. Number 2. Natural selection, we've been taught for the last 150 years, has great explanatory power. But there's loads of evidence against it. And in fact, just 2 years ago, the Royal Society in London, the most prestigious science society in the world, a whole group of scientists came together, atheist evolutionary biologists, and guess what the main question was? Does natural selection work? So the public thinks natural selection works. Really?
Yeah.
So what were they talking about?
They were talking about 2 different schools, the modern synthesis versus the extended synthesis.
Right,
yes.
Fantastic.
And they actually agree on like a great deal. They only have minor disagreements.
Wait, no, that's not true. That's not true.
Yes,
hang on. The extended...
Would any of the biologists at that event dispute
natural
that there is
selection.
good evidence that humans and chimpanzees share a common ancestor?
No.
So none of them would disagree on that.
None of them would.
Based on their
yes, sir.
Their investigation.
Sure, sir, but that's a complete red herring. Okay, but I'll explain why. Wait. All of them, they believe in human chimp ancestry. All of them were atheists. But here's what Eva Jablanka said. Sir, what I'm going to do is this. Whenever I try and reference atheists, I only use those ones who do not believe in God, who do not believe in intelligent design, do not believe in anything like that. Now, Eva Jablanka, here's what she says. She believes in a type of Lamarckian evolution, which is, as you know, an alternative to Darwinian evolution. Now, when she got up there and she tried to explain this, she got challenged by those who believe in Darwinism. Now, the point here is this. She was putting forward... What she was doing was this. She was putting forth an alternative, which was making them uneasy. Why? Because they automatically realized that by challenging Darwinism, 150 years of propaganda will be unraveled.
No, that's such
They understood that, which is also why, sir, when a secular atheist who recently died, Jerry Fodor, didn't believe in God. When he challenged Darwinian evolution, he was called a secular creationist, even though he didn't believe in God. What does that go to show you? There is pressure in academia by the Darwinists, by people. Okay, read the book The Oldberg 16 by Susan Mazur. She's a Australian journalist. She went out, she interviewed Jerry Fodor and all these guys. This is what they said in their book, in the book The Oldberg 16. She says that when she was interviewing him, he said, I'm being called a secular creationist because I'm challenging Darwin. Now, here's what some other scientists think.
What do you mean by them challenging Darwin?
By them challenging Darwin, challenging natural selection.
But what do you mean? But do you mean they're saying that natural selection doesn't happen, or are they saying that natural selection is one of the mechanisms by which biodiversity occurs? But there are other mechanisms, and they have been kind of underrepresented in.
That's a good question. So let me break it down into two concepts. Natural selection can be broken down into two things. Either it can be a tautology, which is survival of the fittest. We're not talking about that. Clearly, the fittest survive. That's why they survive. What we're speaking about is, does natural selection lead to biological novelty and body forms and these types of things? So it's a completely different question. Now,
do any of them disagree with this? Do any of them say that
yeah, of course they do.
No, I think that's a total misrepresentation.
And sir,
I think they'd all agree that natural selection does account for speciation. But there are other kind of mechanisms like epigenetics and like
So you do agree epigenetics is an alternative?
Epigenetics that you have kind of evidence for. It's an alternative.
So it's not an alternative. No. Either be clear.
Let's be clear by what we mean by epigenetics. Like epigenetics, an example of epigenetics would be how kind of whether a gene is turned on or off can be a gene can be turned on during lifetime, and that can be passed on to the next generation.
Is it heritable?
Yeah, and so we have evidence that's occurring, and so there's no reason why that's at odds with Darwinism. That's accepted, and there's nothing.
So tell me this.
It's not like kind of there's a big schism or a big rift, or like, oh no, the whole pyramid's come crashing down.
Sir, tell me this. Why is it that academics have spoken about Lamarck being mocked for 200 years?
Because he didn't have any evidence for what he was.
No, that's not true.
He hadn't identified a molecular mechanism.
Sir, you have to be consistent here. Either Darwinian evolution as we have it today, in terms of a gene-centered view, either it's compatible with a Lamarckian epigenetic view, or it's not. You can't have it both ways.
Like the mainstream kind of, there's nothing in the mainstream view on evolution that says epigenetics doesn't occur, because we have evidence. I
agree.
That epigenetics
and
occurs.
how
and so
when did we get that evidence?
It was pretty recent.
Yes, it was pretty recent. So, since that evidence has been coming out, what does it show? It actually shows you have adaptation, which is not Darwinian.
Yeah. Okay, but we don't need to be.
So, sir, you agree it's adaptation which is non-Darwinian?
Sure, but there's no. Well, I'd say it's adaptation. I have a problem with that word.
No, but it's adaptation which is non-Darwinian.
Sure, but like what?
There you go. So it's an alternative.
So is genetic drift.
So is, yes.
Yeah,
which is why when
there's nothing wrong with theories evolving.
And genetic drift is another form of non-Darwinian evolution.
But we're not bound to say Darwin was 100%
Do you agree with that?
correct.
Do you agree genetic drift is also another example of non-Darwinian evolution?
It's a form of evolution that he kind of hadn't considered.
Okay, sure.
But there's no reason why we need to be bound to what Darwin... This is what you always do. You kind of conflate the modern synthesis and the biological mainstream with Darwinism, and you just leap forwards and backwards and say, oh, did Darwinism know about this? Oh, then Darwinism is wrong. But then just a few minutes ago, you were talking about the modern synthesis, which is like...
Sir, when I refer to Darwinism, I'm speaking about the gene-centered modern synthesis view. I'm not talking about... Darwin didn't know about genes.
But genetic drift, there's nothing kind of contradictory to the gene-centered view about genetic drift.
Well, of course there is.
Okay, explain it.
Because you have non-Darwinian evolution.
And
in fact, sir, in 1975, when genetic drift was published academically, the first thing it was called was non-Darwinian evolution. That's the name of the paper.
Okay, so yeah, it does disagree with
So let's establish there are alternatives to natural selection.
No, but they both occur. Natural selection occurs and genetic drift occurs.
Sir, you're conflating the tautology.
Anything that we have evidence of occurring occurs.
Sir,
or like we adopt the model as it occurs.
Sir,
this is the scientific method.
Sir, what you're doing is this.
What you're doing is this. Based on evidence. What do you have a problem with about that?
What you're doing is this. You're committing the fallacy of the undistributed middle. There are two definitions of natural selection. There is the definition in which it's a tautology, survival of the fittest survive. I agree, everyone agrees, that lamppost agrees. What we're speaking about is natural selection generating novelty, generating biological forms, body forms.
Yes, it does.
Natural selection being the driving force from the first cell to you, me, and the kangaroo. That's what we're speaking about.
Do you think the proponents of the extended synthesis disagree that natural selection leads to any speciation? Do you think they disagree with that proposition?
I think the proponents of the third way of evolution disagree.
What is this third way of evolution?
Okay.
Is that another name for the extended synthesis model?
No, it's more than the extended synthesis. The extended synthesis still tries to work within modern synthesis, tries to extend it. The third way is saying this.
Is that mainstream? Is there kind of
Yes. So let me just explain, right? So the third way of evolution, the reason why it's called third way is this. They are a bunch of secular atheist evolutionary biologists who do not believe in God or intelligent design or creationism, and they don't believe in Darwinian evolution. So what they want to do is they want to come up with a third way. And we have scientists here from China, from America, from Europe, from all over the world, from Harvard, Oxford, MIT, all over the place. And what they're saying is this. They're saying natural selection doesn't work. We need another mechanism.
Okay, so they would disagree, for example, if you have like a population of moths, and moths in the city are exposed to, say, soot or sooty environments.
Sir,
and then they
that's the first definition of natural selection.
But that leads to the biodiversity.
No, that is biodiversity.
If you have like two different organisms,
let me give you,
species, adopting different phenotypes as a result of selection pressure. That's natural selection.
This is again a fallacy of equivocation. They're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. For you to say that darker moths are, say, they're more likely to survive because they were on the trees than the lighter moths, all you're pointing out is survival of the fittest. Now, survival of the fittest obviously exists, but that's not. No, sir, that's not the same thing as human chimpanzee history or any of these other speculative hypotheses. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing.
No, but you asked like, but you said that like this group of biologists like would disagree that natural selection led to this like biodiversity occurring.
Sir,
are you really saying that?
Sir, firstly, this is a good opportunity to churn out some of the propaganda, right? Even that very experiment that was done by Catterall. Do you know he faked those experiments?
Okay.
And he was exposed? Do you know that or not? Did you know that?
I don't know that, but I'll check on it later.
Okay.
But there are other examples.
Have you heard of Jerry Coyne? Have you heard of Jerry Coyne?
There are other examples of species.
Sure, but have you heard of Jerry Coyne?
No.
Very famous atheist evolutionist who's always with Richard Dawkins, right? Do you know what he called that experiment?
No.
He called that experiment like finding out Santa Claus is not real because Catterall faked those results.
Okay.
Right? But assuming those results, sir, do you know what he did? Those moths were dead and he stuck them on the trees.
Okay.
So that very experiment was faked.
Okay,
but that number one, that's a good way of showing how this is more than just science, yeah? We have to fake experiments. But even if it was true, at best.
Plenty of other experiments that show the
Sure,
same thing.
sure,
Sir.
No, sir. Do you know what? We can move on to other ones, but the very fact you want to move on shows you might have known some of this before.
No, I didn't know that before.
And if you did know that,
last time I heard about that was in A-level biology, about that particular moth example.
Sure, and how many other sciences do you know of in which you have these types of fakes happening at a mass scale?
Like you get it in medicine quite often, I guess.
Right? So what's the reason when they do it in medicine?
There are various reasons.
What? Financial?
Ego, financial.
Financial, right.
Sometimes they believe that they're actually right, but they've uncovered like.
I mean when they do it on purpose.
A variety of reasons.
Right.
Like
the reason when they do it in Darwinism is because of ideological. For example, when we see that famous image of the chimpanzee-like creature becoming into a human being. Now you're a learned person. Tell me this. Do any of the evolutionary biologists across the world actually know what that common ancestor looked like?
No. Well, we can have a an error bound, or
What if I was
a
to-
confidence interval.
What if I was to tell you?
Because there's evidence to suggest, like, we wouldn't believe that it had two heads, for example. So obviously
Okay,
we can make some assumptions
what if
of
it
what
looked
it
like a
looks
human being?
What if it looked like a human being? Well, that would be less supported because we.
No, sir.
It would be less
Sir,
supported because we
sir,
know that, like,
sir,
genes drift over
Sir,
time.
let me just
We've
tell you this,
observed
right?
that.
Henry Gee, the senior editor of Nature, the most prestigious journal in the world, he's an atheist and evolutionary biologist. In his book, The Accidental Species, do you know what he says about the common ancestor between human beings and chimpanzees? It could have been any way. We don't actually know what it looks like. It may even been human-like.
No, but it wouldn't be exactly like us, though.
Look, sir.
No.
Okay,
let's
sir.
Do we know that genes, the gene distribution changes over
Sir,
time?
it could have looked like a pig,
Of
for all
course
we
we
know.
That's unlikely, though.
Wait,
Oh,
sir.
you're spreading such,
Sir.
misinformation
No,
here. You're
wait,
leading
sir.
people to believe that kind of genes just do whatever they want, or that any genetic outcome is equally likely.
No,
That's not true.
sir. Do you believe that natural selection can turn a species A into B?
It could do.
Yeah, it could do. Can it turn B back into A?
That's much harder to do. But
Okay.
Why?
Why?
Hypothetically, it could.
Why?
It's much harder to do because, like.
Are birds the descendants of dinosaurs?
In a way, you could
Okay,
say
fine,
that. Yeah.
fine. And we're also technically the descendants of the first cell,
Yeah.
right? So, from a Darwinian perspective, I'm going to make a claim. If you don't shoot down the claim, that's fine. Classification is almost arbitrary because any species can slide into another. You can have a human-like ancestor, wait a second, a human-like ancestor becoming into a chimpanzee-like ancestor becoming into a pig, or the other way around. Anything goes.
No, that's not
You
true.
disagree?
Yeah.
Let me give you a reference for that. Michael Roos, Philosophy of Human Evolution, the Cambridge book.
Okay, and
In
he's
it,
claiming
here's
it's
what
as
he
easy-
says.
He's claiming it's as easy for, like, the first
What he
cell
be-
to
what he
evolve
says
into, like,
is
a dinosaur,
classification,
as a dinosaur to evolve back into the first cell. That's
classification is almost arbitrary because from a Darwinian perspective, anything can become anything.
In theory, but some ways.
In theory, and it
but
is a
some-
theory.
No, but some ways are much harder than other ways, though.
Sir, but what you're actually speaking about now is environmental constraints. But here's the point.
No, I'm not just talking about environmental constraints.
Well, what else are you speaking about?
So, like, well, basically, you can model it as an energy surface. Like, you can model, like,
Based on what parameters?
When you evolve a particular trait, like, for example, the eye, and you adopt a particular kind of strategy for seeing things. Like, for example,
That's environmental.
Like, for example, you know how there are squids which don't have something like what's it called, an iris. They have, like, basically a hole here. And so, given that once they've kind of evolved that structure, they've, like, reached a kind of local minimum where any kind of movement away from that would make them less fit and less able to reproduce. And so it's much less likely that they would then suddenly, like, evolve, into a human, because they'd have to go through kind of these life forms, these kind of intermediate life forms, which are totally rubbish at surviving and reproducing. So yes, clearly there are some like
hang on.
movements which are
Hang on,
kind
sir.
of easier according to natural selection than other movements.
And these are environmental.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you
well,
and I
everything's
point and
environmental.
exactly that's what I just pointed out.
Okay, so what's
So
the problem here?
there is no problem. The problem is
So you
that
misrepresented what
no,
that biologist said.
no,
Because
sir.
you
No, sir.
you
Here's what
quoted
happened.
him,
Here's
and
what's
so-
happened. You said to me it's harder for some things to turn into others. I said because of environmental constraints.
Yeah.
Then you said no,
Okay,
and you
so-
gave me examples of environmental constraints.
Okay, fair enough. But,
Right?
but like that shows that.
So sir, at best, all you're saying is anything can become into anything else if there are sufficient environmental conditions.
Well, there are.
And the environmental conditions on a planet which is apparently 4 billion years old, this large, with this much speciation, is almost infinite.
What?
On a planet, on a time scale of 4 billion years of this Earth, with how long life has been on this Earth, the amount of possibilities is almost infinite.
But that doesn't change that some, even if the possibilities, even if there's a wide range of possibilities, the possibilities aren't infinite. Because, for example, there's no place on this Earth where, the ambient temperature
Sir,
is 1,000
forget
degrees.
infinite, let's call it Googleplex. Google Plex.
No, but even then, like kind of, you know, like there's a certain kind of range of like temperatures. There's a certain range of kind of molecular environments in the atmosphere.
Okay, sir.
So
Sir.
like we can parameterize it.
Sir,
And it's not infinite. It's not like kind of. It's not
Sir.
like how you can evolve
Sir.
to be.
We
like,
have a massive.
An organism that's that you might find on Mars.
Sir.
There's no Mars-like environment on the planet Earth. Really.
Sir, but that wasn't my point. My point was you have large plasticity going on. Now, when you look at, for example, flies need to know where humid areas are. Now, flies could have been designed to have humidity detectors. There's humidity there, let me go fly. Instead, natural selection has created an indirect solution in which they have a light detector. So they go to areas which are dark, and areas which are dark are more likely to be damp. So yes, I agree, natural selection has environmental constraints, but we already know that. One thing we do also know is that natural selection says that a human being-like creature can come from a non-human being-like creature with traits which are nothing like it. Therefore, it's also possible the other way around. Therefore, sir,
but like, do you agree that
sir,
kind of the evolutionary pathway of like the first cell to a dinosaur is much more likely than the proposed evolutionary pathway of a dinosaur becoming back to like the first cell?
Sir,
do you agree with that?
Sir,
and if you aren't willing to answer that, would you agree?
Sure,
that
no, let me answer the first one first. Let me answer the first one first. What I try and do, to the best of my ability, is not give my opinion. I try and give the opinion of leading evolutionary biologists. Now, the answer to this question, according to Stephen Jay Gould, not me, is yes.
No,
yeah, it is.
I'm certain you're misrepresenting.
Okay, sure. Now, okay, sure. So look up this example because we're filming everything, and I come to the park regularly.
Can you give a quote for that? I want to check.
So let me give you the quote. He says, back in his days we had VHS. He says, if you rewind the tape of life and you rerun it, you'll have different outcomes.
That's not the same thing, is it?
Why is it not?
Because the fact that like...
Wait, hang on a second. Do you first agree he's just pointed out something which is different to what you were saying?
No.
How?
Because like what he's pointing out is that by chance, like for example, evolutionary, like.
Sir, did you know he said that before I told you?
What?
Did you know he said that before I told you?
He put this example up with me before. Yeah.
Right. So you know that's the mainstream view.
Yeah, and there's not, and
so you know the mainstream. You know the mainstream view.
That's obviously true.
Sir. Let's break it down into philosophical terms because you're a philosophical guy. Are we necessary beings biologically? No. Fantastic. So we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
It could have been otherwise.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing as saying that it is equally probable and equally easy evolutionary for the first cell to become a dinosaur.
Sir.
A dinosaur to never become the first cell again.
Let's have a conceptual picture game. This is the history of life from my left hand to my right hand, starting off with prokaryotes all the way to me and you in that hat. Right, we have this. Now here's another one which is different. Between these two, why is this one more likely than any other possibility?
You know that certain versions or tapes, certain potential tapes are more likely than others because, for example, you couldn't have the first life forms being very complicated.
Can you just lift up your head? Lift up your hat.
It's pretty hard. But okay.
Lift up your hat.
No.
Just lift up. I just want to see something. Your brain is about the normal size as every other biologist. They have not worked out the evolutionary history of the last couple of thousand years, let alone the last 4 billion years. Yeah, you in this park alone with the same size brain as everyone else, you're making a claim. Yes, they do. You're making a claim that this possibility is more likely than any other. Which goes to show...
No, I didn't.
So what did you say?
No. I said that some windings of some plays of the tape of life, or if there's a space of all the possible kind of like plays of life, some of them we could imagine them, and we could like have and we could say that those are less likely than others. So, for example, let's take a play of life where the first cell, where the first organism was multicellular. Okay, that's clearly very unlikely because how can you get a multicellular kind of first life form without having first a single cellular life form? So that's an example of a potential play of the tape of life, which you'd say is much less likely than the one that we had.
That wasn't the point I was making, though.
No, you said all potential plays of that all potential.
Yeah, potential.
Yes.
So you can't give me an example that's incoherent.
It's not.
To start off with multicellular, naturalistically, before you have cellular, is incoherent. I asked, but sir,
It's not impossible.
sir, what you've done here is this.
I could give you a less extreme example that would fit.
Sir, I gave you two coherent possibilities. Possibility A, possibility B. You dampened my example by giving me an incoherent possibility.
No, you said all playings of the tape of life. You didn't specify all coherent playings of the tape of life.
When I say potential, what else does it mean?
Potential means anything that's possible.
But you're giving me
potential means anything that's possible.
Sir, if I'm going to ask you about married bachelors, we're not going to have a fantastic conversation.
That's not the same thing, a married
It is.
bachelor.
It's incoherent.
No, it's
it's
not.
incoherent.
It's not impossible.
According to you, it's incoherent.
No, it's not.
Hang on a second.
It's something that could happen, even though it's extremely unlikely.
Sir.
Like you could get a bunch of ribozymes, and they could mutate. They could mutate together to form an RNA-based life form, which had kind of communication genes.
Is it asexual or is it sexual?
It has to be an asexual.
Asexual. Okay.
Yeah, so
now, sir.
It's obviously like
sir, let's
it's
use.
obviously extremely
Sure.
unlikely that the first cell,
So, sir.
And if you're unhappy, I could choose another example.
No problem.
Like
But I'm going to use your logic now. Asexual or sexual? Which one is more better from a Darwinian point of view?
It depends on the situation.
Okay, so let me ask you this. You have a cell, it's asexual, it decides to have children, decides you get children. Me, as an Asian Pakistani man, I want to get married. So what do? I contact somebody, they say no, you need to have a house which is this big, you need to earn this much money, I need to go somewhere, bribe a father-in-law. Sexual evolution is way more complex and less, from a Darwinian point of view, in terms of fitness advantages, in terms of its fitness, than sexual. So if you're gonna say, wait, hang on a second. But sir, if you're gonna say sexual evolution is more fit than asexual, then you need to make an argument for it. But you need, but sir, here's the thing.
That's the advantage. So
Here's the handicap that you have. You can't compare sexual production to asexual. You have to show how asexual, which is so friggin' easy, leads to sexual, which is so friggin' difficult.
Because the incentive is that kind of, if you have like a group of asexually reproducing species, a species that asexually reproduces, each reproduction is done by just the mutation and sometimes the lateral transmission of genes.
Horizontal gene transfer.
Yeah, like bacteria.
Which is also a problem for Darwinism.
I don't think it is.
It is.
Okay, but let's get on to that later.
So you do know some of the problems, so I'm very surprised that you still want to stick to it.
None of these, what you call problems, are enough to...
They're not what I call problems.
No, but none of these kind of differences of opinion or differences of perspective between different schools of evolutionary biologists show that there's a fundamental kind of like the whole stack of cards is falling down and that we can't believe in any of the conclusions.
Sir,
but like,
all I'm surprised at is you want to support Darwinian evolution, although you clearly know of examples like horizontal, the biological mainstream understands that horizontal gene transfer has been used by some biologists to challenge Darwinism.
Okay, let's talk about that later. I haven't actually heard of that before, but sir. A minor
sir,
something like,
can you do this? Okay, can you, sir, I'm going to give you two references. Check them. If I'm wrong, come back next week.
Okay, let me write them down.
Here's the references. What Darwin got wrong, New Scientist 2009. Write that down. The front page article is about what Darwin got wrong. Yeah.
Sorry, my phone's being a little bit slow. What?
Do you believe in Darwin, sir? Do you believe in Darwin?
What year again?
Huh?
What year again?
2009. What Darwin got?
Yeah.
Sorry, Darwin was wrong. That's the front cover.
Okay.
And it speaks about horizontal gene transfer. The second is go to third way of evolution. On the front page, it mentions the problems with Darwinian evolution, and one of them is horizontal gene transfer.
Okay, but like, let's talk about sexual reproduction again.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the incentive for a species to develop kind of the alternate way of reproducing or sexual reproduction is that because you have two members of that organism involved in the reproduction, you're effectively mixing up two genomes at once, and so you get more variation each generation compared with just asexual reproduction, where you're almost just cloning yourself, and the only kind of differences are due to horizontal gene transfer or kind of random mutation. So it's more beneficial to have like more variance in each of your kind of your offspring, because then it's like diversifying your portfolio. You're hedged against the different risks of how the environment can change.
Now,
so that's the advantage why some species adopt sexual reproduction.
Okay. Now what you've done there is you've compared sexual to asexual.
Yes.
My question was, how does asexual lead to sexual when asexual is much more simpler? I didn't ask for today, show me one advantage or two or five of something sexual gives which asexual doesn't. What I'm saying is, sexual is so easy, asexual is so easy, that leading to asexual, which is far more complex, far more vulnerabilities in it, from a natural selection point of view, makes no sense.
Yeah, it does.
It doesn't?
No, it does, because like the first organisms which would have done sexual reproduction would have also done asexual reproduction. They would have simply had an alternative mechanism.
Right. So how long ago did that happen?
I'm not fully aware of how long ago that was.
Sure. But at that point, there was a trade-off going on.
Yeah.
Okay?
Well, yeah. You can say it's a
Now, all you've done so far is this, and this is a big, big problem. All you've done is summarize the book, The Blind Watchmaker. Because for you to give maybe this trade-off, you can explain all of the diversity of life like that. But the problem with that is something which is a consistent account, which is what Stephen Jay Gould pointed out about Just So Stories. An account which is consistent with natural selection is not enough to show that it actually happened.
Okay, sure, but like...
Do you understand that point?
I understand, but...
So what you've given me is just a Just So Story.
Yeah, but in this park, like, all I can provide you with is this kind of post hoc explanation. An actual biologist could do a study simulating kind of how different things could have evolved, but with conservative assumptions about like a certain number of mutations per generation. So you can provide supporting evidence for different hypotheses.
Yeah, but if each one of those hypotheses also has a completely valid alternative Just So story, and if these Just So and the problem, and sir, the problem with these Just So stories is it's conflating what's theoretically possible with what actually happened, which is why the term Just So story wasn't coined by religious folk. It was coined by evolutionary atheist biologists who were sick of these evolutionary scenarios which had no evidence.
Yeah, but
isn't that true though, at least? That we didn't come up with Just So stories, it was the biological community.
Like Aesop fables, like that coined the term. But like, yeah, like obviously evolutionary biologists would have like started using it in the field of evolutionary biology. Because I agree that there's a good way of doing evolutionary biology and a bad way of doing evolutionary biology.
Exactly, fantastic.
So like,
fantastic. And all I'm saying is this. All I'm saying is this. All I'm saying is this, sir. All I'm saying is this, sir. From a of course they can do. Of course they can be done. But here's the point. Here's the point about many experiments which are done. They're still undetermined by data.
No, well,
because when we go back and look at the history of life, and when we do a certain experiment, that experiment can be explained by one hypothesis, but can also be explained by another equivalent hypothesis.
So do you think
So you have underdetermination of data.
Okay, so do you think the recent shared common ancestry of apes and chimpanzees is one of those ones which isn't what you say supported by data?
No, I would say something different. I would say in terms of the biological community, human-chimp ancestry is not something for which they try and come up with an alternative. There are a few people who try and come up with human-pig ancestry, like that McCarthy guy in America, but ignore him. Let's just say there's a consensus. All I'm doing is this.
And are they reaching that by are they reaching it by a logical investigation
yes,
of
they are.
the evidence?
Yes, they are.
Okay,
I disagree.
They're not assuming. They're not using what you.
No, sir. I'm talking about the human pig ancestry. They're using the same method as human chimp ancestry.
But there must be less evidence for it.
No, it's a homology.
No, but there's clearly less. So it's less about the reason. Why do you think the hypothesis of humans having the closest common ancestor to pigs is less well subscribed to and less believed in by biologists?
Okay.
Why do you think
before I answer that question, I'm going to point out something. Truth is not democratic. So even if the majority of biologists they prefer human chimp ancestry over human pig ancestry, it doesn't show that has more evidence. So the answer which I'm going to give is this. The simplest way of saving face is by covering up the human pig ancestry, the human pig similarities.
So you think that kind of the community of biologists aren't lending credence to human pig ancestry because they're covering each other's backsides? They aren't doing it based on a sincere investigation of the past?
Not all of them. Not all of them. The people who want to push human chimp ancestry is true, literally, which is a minority of biologists.
What do you mean by literally?
As in, it's true. It's like your hat. It exists.
But are they using that just as a shorthand for this is the model with the most evidence in favour of it, and it has strong evidence in favour of it?
Okay, sir. I agree with you that there is
strong evidence in favour
No.
of human
I don't
ancestry.
agree with that. I agree there's a
Why don't you disagree? Why don't you agree
sir,
with that?
there's a misunderstanding between the public and the academic. Now, when the academics, they say human chimp ancestry is a fact, what they're saying is, according to our method, according to these assumptions, according to this, we are saying is best supported by the data, including all of the 4 assumptions which I mentioned. But when it comes to the public, they think it means it's true, literally.
Let's kind of paraphrase it, because we did agree that those assumptions weren't just kind of leaps of faith. Those are kind of those 4 assumptions are themselves based on evidence and logical deduction.
No, sir. The assumptions are not based on evidence. The assumptions are used to try and verify the assumption. And with each one of these assumptions, there's recalcitrant facts. So when it comes to methodological naturalism, philosophical naturalism, we have recalcitrant facts like the beginning of the universe, like objective human values, like recalcitrant fact is a fact that resists a theory. So for example, if you're accused of murdering me, and there's 5 witnesses that you murdered me in Speaker's Corner on the 7th of July, whatever it is today, a recalcitrant fact would be you in McDonald's or Starbucks on CCTV. That's a recalcitrant fact. It's a fact that resists the theory.
Yeah. Okay.
So with each one of these assumptions, we have recalcitrant facts.
No, but we possibly, but we also have more kind of evidence that that favours them. So you ask yourself which model fits the.
But sir, do you know what?
Maximum likelihood method, don't you? You ask which model fits the.
Sir,
all the available evidence.
But sir, do you know what's happening, which is fantastic? From a public perspective, we're now discussing about the reality of the assumptions and whether those assumptions are valid. But when you go out and speak to an average person, they're taught this as if it's true and that's it.
No, but
and don't you think that's wrong?
It would be ideal if it would be ideal if if they were aware that science doesn't lead to absolute certainty about how the universe functions. However, I think it's more beneficial that they have faith in the scientific community and well-established scientific consensus than if they have bizarre, unsubstantiated total skepticism and belief that humans and chimps don't have a shared common ancestor.
It's not got to do with extreme skepticism.
No, because your alternative to believing in the biological consensus is for you want everyone to believe that humans and chimps in fact do not have a shared common ancestor. But in fact there's much more evidence to to suggest that they do. And so a rational human being should have much more faith and much more belief and certainty in the proposition and the model that humans and chimps do have a shared recent common ancestry, then they should have certainty and faith and degree of belief in the idea that
all I want to do is this.
Came about in the Garden of Eden.
All I want to do is this. I want to point out the difference between the public understanding and the academic understanding and let people decide for themselves.
Okay, well,
that's it.
Because it sounds like you've given up ground, because I've seen you like debate biologists like in universities before, and with them you're kind of very modest and you kind of give like the least objectionable version of your account.
Which is what? Which is when? When?
So when you were talking, I can't remember what the name, but some biologist in
Jeremy Pritchard.
Sussex.
Recently.
It was like earlier this year. It was in a university. You spent nearly kind of the first 45 minutes of the talk talking about how scientists have no evidence that there certainly is no God, and you also said that science doesn't lead to absolute certainty about how the universe
functions. And did he disagree with anything I said?
He did not. However, you didn't push forward the views which you frequently do in Speaker's Corner, where you try and cast doubt on the idea that humans and chimps have a common ancestor.
So
when you're faced with like a more well-equipped kind of a speaker with more biological knowledge, you kind of retreat into your kind of modest zone.
Okay,
and then when you're in
true.
front of like kind of the general public who kind of haven't studied this in great depth, then you start like kind of trying to convince them that. Then you start trying to present misinformation where you misrepresent biologists' opinions, and you say, oh, like there are all these people that say Darwinism is false.
Sir, did you see my entire presentation?
I believe so, yes. And
okay.
I saw how at the very end you kind of said something like, and there's no reason to believe that there isn't an Abrahamic God.
Okay, wait, hang on, sir. Okay, sir, you had your chance to talk, so let me talk. So you saw my entire presentation.
Yeah.
In this park, I have said repeatedly 3 things. Darwinian evolution is based on a probabilistic framework. Have I not said that before?
Yeah, you said that.
Darwinian evolution is based upon multiple assumptions. And I've also said that this... Wait, hang on, sir. You had your chance to talk. We're talking about that video. And I said there are disputes about its most fundamental ideas.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
It's disputes about its most fundamental ideas.
It has disputes about its most fundamental
PAD. In that very presentation, and go back and watch it tonight. That's exactly what I said at the end of my presentation. And in fact, in the Q&A, I brought it up again because somebody asked about human chimp ancestry. So, what's interesting is this. So what's interesting? Sir, firstly, that shows your claim that what I'm saying in the park is different to what I'm saying to an academic in public is wrong. Because in front of him, I mentioned those things. Now, no, I didn't. Sir, look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 cameras. No one's going to delete this footage. Go watch my debate, and you got all this evidence. I will be a liar if I didn't mention that.
Why didn't you say at the beginning that science gives no reason not to believe in an Abrahamic God? You said that at the very end. Why didn't you say that at the beginning?
Because logically I started from deism to theism to Abrahamic theism.
Okay, but like
sir, what's happened now? Sir, what's happened now is this. You made a claim which I didn't mention. I didn't mention some things. Now I gave you evidence, I mentioned it. You've changed your position. No, sir. You've changed your position. You've now said, why didn't you say at the beginning rather than the end?
No, I also said
so you've changed your position now.
No, I said it when I first kind of brought up this university talk.
Did you actually watch it?
I said kind of, apart from at the very end, you kind of suddenly threw that in.
Sir,
I am aware.
Sir, you made a claim I didn't mention probabilistic framework, assumptions and disputes in the debate. I mentioned it in my opening presentation and later on.
No, you spent nearly all of the debate just talking about
sir, what did you say? What did you say earlier? You didn't disagree?
What?
He didn't disagree.
He didn't disagree with like the fact that kind of science doesn't lead to absolute certainty about
Yes,
the
yes.
universe.
So let's agree.
And he didn't disagree that scientists have no. He didn't disagree that there's nothing in science. Like there's no reason why scientists wouldn't believe in there being a god or something along those lines. Like
okay,
a
sir.
God can.
Sir, you didn't watch it.
No, I did watch it.
So let me just tell you what I said in the debate, and you got all these cameras. Number one, I said science doesn't undermine the existence of God.
Yes. Yes.
I said science doesn't lead to certainty, and I mentioned science doesn't undermine deism, theism, or Abrahamic theism. Sir, 1 second, man. Sir, I also mentioned science does not undermine the Abrahamic theism because even human ancestry is based on a probabilistic framework which has assumptions, which has disputes. And in the presentation, I spent time bringing out a quote from Elliot Sober, an atheist philosopher of science, who says humans and chimps must share a common ancestor because they're so similar, and humans and mushrooms must have separate ancestry because they're so different. This is both naive. I said that all in the opening. So you did not watch the beginning of the debate.
I remember quite clearly that the only time you spent any time talking about Abrahamic.
So did I mention?
You spoke about it in the question and answer section when
did I mention about
human and chimp
did I chat?
ancestry.
Did I?
And what you said to that person was basically kind of, okay, accept it as a working model, but also don't believe in it being true.
That means you didn't watch the debate.
No, I did. You were telling him to adopt double truth.
Sir, I wasn't. So, sir, now two things are going to get exposed. The very fact you gave me that example shows you didn't watch the opening, because the points which I just mentioned now, I mentioned in the beginning. Now, what I said to the gentleman later on is something different, but that's also something which correlates with the beginning, which is about Darwinian evolution being based on a probabilistic framework with assumptions, with disputes. All I was saying to him is this. Sir, there's two things here. Number one, I said science is based on a probabilistic framework with assumptions, with disputes in the beginning, and the professor didn't disagree.
That's about the Abrahamic God bit, though.
Sir, that was in the opening. Look, sir, the question that I spoke to the gentleman, which is about epistemic weighing, let's do that as your second question. Let's deal with the first question first. You're saying I didn't mention probabilistic framework with assumptions, with disputes. I did mention that. But here's the thing. Find me one single evolutionary biologist in the world who will disagree that Darwinian evolution is based on a probabilistic framework, that it has multiple assumptions, and there are disputes amongst biologists about its most fundamental ideas. If you manage to find me one, bring them here, or we can set up a discussion. Why? Because. No, they would not.
Yes, they would.
No, they would not.
Has connotations that you just left with.
No, sir.
Whereas many of the so-called assumptions.
So there are assumptions.
No, I'm saying so-called, what you call assumptions. Many of them are actually based on
sir.
observation and
Hold
evidence and inference.
If an evolutionary biologist uses the word, and he's an atheist, and he's a renowned academic, and he uses the word assumptions, if I give you that quote, will you admit you're wrong?
Well, it depends on the context that he said it.
What if he says that?
If he said, all of like evolutionary biology is just based on assumptions.
No.
That would be
no.
Would be out of
Sir, don't try and get out of it. I asked you a question. If he says that the assumptions of neo-Darwinism have been falsified.
Let's look at the exact context, and I'm sure it'll be just another example.
Would you admit you're wrong? Would you admit you're wrong?
No, because
So you wouldn't admit you're wrong when you're wrong?
No, because you're conflating two different situations. I'm objecting to your use of the word assumptions of the so-called assumptions of evolutionary biology, because the word assumption has the connotation that it's not based on evidence and sensible logical reasoning. An assumption is not if you assume something, is when you just think that it's true. The opposite of an assumption would be kind of when you believe in something based on firm evidence. You don't need to assume anything if there's firm evidence.
Okay.
So things things like, for example,
Sir,
the fact that, like one of the examples, homology, which you give it, you call that an assumption. In fact, it's based on logical reasoning and evidence, because like we observe, the evidence is that we observe that our genetic sequence, kind of, all other things being equal.
Sir, what you're doing now,
you call that an assumption, but it's actually kind of based on sound reasoning.
What you're doing is this: you're confusing assumptions and conclusions. Let me just make a statement. Let's stick to this.
But it's based on evidence and reasoning.
So the same website. Go to thethirdwayofelution.com, Dennis Noble, an Oxford evolutionary professor. All the central assumptions of neo-Darwinism have been disproven.
But we need to look at what he means by that.
Gradualism, for one. So let's start by one. Gradualism is not a conclusion, it's an assumption. And according to him, it's been disproven.
But it depends on in what exact context.
Firstly, sir, let's agree about something, right? There are assumptions in evolutionary biology.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Not all of them are kind of just blind.
Fantastic. Have some assumptions been challenged by other atheist evolutionary biologists?
Yeah, probably.
That's all I'm saying.
No, but like again, you're like kind of, now it sounds like you're leaping between Darwinism's ideas 150 years ago and just like kind of the biological.
Okay, sir.
Today.
Sir.
Okay,
sir. Look.
Sir,
the reason why you're making these simple mistakes is because you don't understand the difference between these two things.
No, it's you.
So let me just ask you a question. Did Darwin know about genetics? No, he didn't. So the selfish gene idea, where did that come from?
20th century biologists.
Yes, like who?
One of them would be
W.D. No, that's bull.
Well,
no, sir.
What do you mean by come from?
Sir, this is the thing. This is the reason why I like pointing out that atheists don't know what they're talking about. Number one, Richard Dawkins is not an evolutionary biologist. He's a journalist, a famous professor. Two, he never came up with the selfish gene.
Okay, yeah, fine.
But why do people like you think he did?
Because he popularized it.
Because he popularized it, and there's propaganda, and you guys actually don't understand the theory itself.
No, like the central ideas.
Let me tell you something, right? The selfish gene idea, the idea of a gene-centered view, this came about when Richard Dawkins was still in his nappies.
Yeah.
So why do you think that he came up with it? Because you guys, look, I'm going to be honest. Richard Dawkins is a prophet for you guys. You try and relate him to everything. So let me just clarify some things. If you want to attribute the selfish gene in terms of its modern, most sophisticated form, W.G. Hamilton. Richard Dawkins just got popular off it. That's it. Okay. Now, whenever it's mentioned the gene-centered view, automatically we should think of the modern synthesis, because Darwin had no clue about genetics, although Mendel sent him his paper. From what we know, he didn't read it. So when we're speaking about the gene-centered view, we're speaking about the modern synthesis. Now the problem with atheists like yourself is you try and come and challenge this content, but you don't even know the history, and you don't even know the background, and you don't even know any of these things. And you don't know. No, I'm being.
You don't need to necessarily know history if you actually know biology.
So,
okay. If you know biology, you don't need to know the history.
Okay, so let me just ask you this. Sir, 1 second. Let me ask you this. You're saying that you actually know what you're talking about when it comes to evolutionary biology.
Certain things, yes.
Sure. Do you know about natural selection?
Yeah, to some
Okay, so who came up with the theory of natural selection?
Oh, that's not relevant to what natural selection is, though.
No, it's absolutely relevant because I'm going to give you an example.
Are you able to know what natural selection is without knowing who invented it?
Yes, you are.
Yes,
but
so what
you claim to know about evolutionary biology, and you love bringing in random scientific facts which are irrelevant to show your knowledge.
No, they are not irrelevant.
So let's begin off with this.
You never answered. Why this person who was standing here. You never answered him when he asked you why do you consider a paternity test to be evidence of shared ancestry? But you don't consider
because there's circular reasoning.
What's the circular reasoning?
Okay, so here's the circular reasoning, and we're going to go back to this point because this is another side issue you brought up.
It's not a side issue.
We know human beings beget other human beings. We know human beings beget other human beings. So when you're doing a paternity test, you're not assuming homology. Homology is an assumption that you make in nature, and you try and go as far as you can before you come across homoplasy. Now, to begin off with this idea that to equate the human chimpanzee's theory of paternity test is a falsification. Now, here's the point. Here's the point, sir. Here's the point. Here's the point. You agreed with me earlier. No, sir. We went off on your tangent. Now we're gonna go back to what we're talking about.
Because you haven't answered it.
No,
just like
sir,
people to believe
sir,
something wrong.
sir, sir. Listen, listen. Sir, listen. We can go back to that in a second. Let's deal with this issue that you're trying to sidetrack. Natural selection. Who came up with it? Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin. One second. One second. One second. It is. Sir, it is. Let me explain why. Because you clearly don't know about this theory, and you keep trying to show that you do.
No, because you're misrepresenting it to the public. You're spreading so much.
How the hell am I misrepresenting it to the public when you didn't know the difference between the modern synthesis and who came up with selfish gene? So let's stick to this.
Because that's history. That's not the actual
natural selection as a theory.
You've misrepresented the content of the theory.
Charles Darwin came up with it. Charles Darwin came up with it. So did Alfred Russel Wallace. Now, I'm going to prove something. Sir, I'm going to prove something. What I'm going to prove is this. Using just the people here, I'm going to show natural selection is false.
Okay, great. So what do you mean by natural selection being false, by the way?
Let me explain. What I mean by that is that natural selection is what creates biological novelty.
Isn't it one
Sir,
of the things that
let me,
creates biological
sir.
novelty?
Ooh, see what we're doing here? Before I've even got to the argument, you're trying to run up to something else.
No,
we're doing about natural selection.
I'm trying to make you kind of define very clearly the objection that you're about to bring, so you don't like hopscotch. Okay, so
sure.
Are you saying that natural selection leads to no biological novelty at all?
Sure. What's your name? Abdullah, right. Do you believe he's subhuman?
No.
You don't believe he's subhuman. What would you think about a theory that's predicated on other subhuman species being subhuman, being inferior?
Well,
you say it's false?
No, I'd say it's morally incorrect and like.
You'd say it's false. You'd say it's false. Right.
Sure. But
if you take off your shoe.
Even if
Darwin
believed this.
Okay, hang on a second. Hang on a second.
This is so irrelevant.
Whoa,
this is just
no, it's not, sir.
It
I can see you're very uncomfortable and I'm enjoying this.
You are, you're
Sir.
This isn't what like
sir, let me ask you something.
There aren't any mainstream biologists who say that kind of people like this gentleman are inferior.
Okay, sir, 1 second. I'm going to give you evidence. I'm going to give you evidence. Okay, sir, where are you from? Where are you from?
The biological mainstream.
You're from Jamaica. Okay, 1 second. You're from Jamaica, Abdullah. Okay, 1 second.
Why you're debasing yourself by
Tell me
doing
this.
You're degrading yourself. You're making yourself look like a clown when you do
now,
this isn't biology.
If somebody, sir, let me ask you a question. If somebody believes that black people have feet like these, they have an opposable thumb, which is why they're good at climbing trees, what would you say about such an individual?
Racist.
You'd say he's racist. You'd say he's a fool, and you'd say he sees evidence when it's not there. That's what Charles Darwin wrote in The Descent of Man.
Okay, so why is that relevant to biological?
Oh, why is it relevant?
Yeah,
he didn't deny it's there.
Yeah, because modern biologists don't believe this.
Black people are not as evolved as white people, obviously.
Yeah, I'm not defending that. I'm not defending that. This is total showboating.
I love it. That song, Firestarter, Prodigy, Firestarter. Firestarter in here.
I say what they please. I'm saying what no.
All right.
No, the fact that you're running
cultural
away from
evolution.
That you don't want to talk about actual biological facts. This is a circus. You aren't talking about the actual biology of science now.
When you say it's not relevant,
I half heard what you said.
No. Can I say one thing?
It's not relevant
So,
to science.
I'll tell you why it's relevant.
It's not relevant
Because
to science at all.
I'll tell you why it's relevant. One second. Okay, you have authority.
As a black person, my foot has been victim of this kind of thing. And this is why they flood African continent. There is life is a fight for survival, and there's a superior race and an inferior race. And those who propose that idea, because obviously they're white, they assume that the black race was the inferior race, and that set off the prey on the African continent with my forefathers. Now, the reason why it's very important now, if you know what happened in America as well, like eugenics to black people, because of the same thing to black woman could have been suffered from the free will of having pregnant to give birth. how many trauma black people been through. If you know anyone of this thing, and this is basic knowledge, everyone knows this. For you to say, for what you say, I find as an insult.
Okay.
No,
Let me make another point. The other point which I'm going to make.
I'm not.
Here's why it's relevant. One second. Here's why it's relevant scientifically.
I wasn't saying
Here's why it's
suffering.
he wasn't. What? No. Here's the point. Say one second, Abdullah. Abdullah, one second. The point he was saying was it's not relevant scientifically. Yeah. So let me tell you, Jamie. No, what he was saying was it's not relevant scientifically. Let me tell you why it's 100% relevant scientifically. Because Darwin and the people after him, they saw evidence which did not exist. When Darwin went to South America and he saw the Fuegians, he said these are primitive people that can hardly speak. Yet chroniclers that were there decades before him, they described the Fuegians as having a very complex society and a vocab of over 30,000 words. Yet he thought they were savages that could hardly speak. So he saw evidence that was not there. Now,
about what the biology
sir, I am just about to, if you let me. Sir, I'm just about to. Sir, I am just about to, if you wait. Sir, just wait. Sir, just wait. So the first person to realize natural selection is nonsense is the co-founder of natural selection along with Darwin, which is Alfred Russel Wallace. Now, Alfred Russel Wallace, his name we used to initially call Darwin's theory, Darwin and Wallace's theory. He said afterwards that he disagreed with Darwin because he said, if you take one of those, they call them savages from South America or Africa, and you stick them in Cambridge, they can be just as intelligent as Europeans. So Alfred Russel Wallace said, natural selection applies to everything except human beings. Now, what he actually did is this. He committed blasphemy, which is why, sir, one second, which is why, sir, one second. He's saying that's not relevant to the science today. Natural selection is the very core of our economics, of our sciences, and of evolutionary biology. So don't tell me it's not part of science today. It's not only part of science today. The reality is this.
Do you think scientists still believe that black people are inferior?
No. Here's the thing.
Oh, you don't
Let me answer.
Why didn't you
No evolutionary scientist who wants to keep his job will ever say publicly what they know academically, which is, in its very foundation, this theory is racist, and they had to cover up the racism post-World War II.
No, but they aren't saying that this is like a well-supported fact. You're just talking about an emotive subject in order to like stir the crowd up.
Nope.
It isn't relevant to science today.
Sir, the point I was making was this. Sir, the point I was making was this. If people in the here in Speaker's Corner, if you believe all human beings are equal, then natural selection is false. If people here believe all human beings are equal, then natural selection is false.
No, but natural selection, you're conflating two different ideas of natural selection. Well,
Who's got an iPad?
No, the way you define...
You got an iPad?
No. There's natural selection, and you can use natural selection to refer to Darwin's original body of ideas. And yes, Darwin's original body of ideas contained many falsehoods. But that doesn't mean you throw out like the baby with the bathwater and suggest that natural selection isn't a mechanism which leads to a significant proportion of biodiversity and speciation, which is what biologists believe, and they have good reason for believing that because they're basing it on evidence and observation. So, we have many examples of kind of speciation happening, and the reason it happens is because of selection pressures. Well, that's an example of like a cartoon from 150 years ago. Why are you showing me that? That's not relevant to the science today.
Really?
Are you really just going to...
Sir, one second, sir. This is, according to Darwin, an example of speciation. What do we have here? These are not caricatures, and that's the point. These are not caricatures. This is a textbook example which Darwin approved of.
Okay, but we don't believe in that part of Darwin.
Here we go. Here we go. So, wait. Sir, 1 second. Sir, no. Sir, I am going to not show. Firstly, I'm going to show how this picture, which you... Listen, sir. Look at my watch. I've got time.
Yeah, fine.
I've got time.
If you have time, when you go back to the actual science.
Which I'm about to explain.
Yeah, you spent 15 minutes.
If natural selection is true, sir, can you let me speak for 1 minute and then you can blabble on?
You speak for so long.
Sure.
You just give examples. That's anachronistic.
Sure. Sir.
I've asked him to talk about what mainstream science is today.
Sure.
And he keeps on saying, I will, and then he gives another example from 150
Okay,
years
have you
ago.
got a watch? Can you give me 1 minute and he shuts up for 1 minute? 1 minute, watch.
Please talk about mainstream science
You
today.
can't interrupt me for 1 minute.
Yeah, sure, but please talk about mainstream science today.
Don't interrupt me.
Mainstream scientists today.
Okay, wait 1 second. Abdullah, wait.
I'm gonna say one thing. I'm gonna go one thing.
Wait, Abdullah, 1 second. Abdullah, 1 second.
Today is no different. They're still influenced by that.
Yes, exactly. That's the point I was going to make.
And let me prove it to you.
No, wait.
In America, there's a scientist from America that is online where they believe in the world, the earth is overpopulated, and they're doing racial cleansing. Guess who's done? They're doing racial cleansing.
Yeah, but...
And the black people is going first. Today, right now, they're still doing it.
They aren't mainstream scientists though. Like they're condemned.
Okay,
by
Abdullah,
science.
1 second. Abdullah, 1 second.
They're condemned.
Okay, here you go.
What those people are doing are wrong, but they aren't supported by scientists today.
James.
That would be called
James,
science.
1 minute. Hold
Okay.
this, please.
Okay, but talk.
Okay, sir. Look, just give me 1 minute. I'm not even going to take 1 minute. I'm going to show you how all this is relevant, okay? Ready? Natural selection. The theory of natural selection is about variation, and in every type of species there has to be variation, and some are fitter than others, and this is true for human beings as it is true for everything else. So the racist ideas of Darwin from 150 years ago, they are just as relevant if natural selection is to apply to human beings. Stop. 23 seconds.
Okay.
Carry on.
I'll tell you exactly why that's wrong. Okay. So, like the fact that natural selection, the fact that there are some more fit human beings than others in certain environmental environments, doesn't mean that those human beings are morally superior or morally inferior. So you've conflated kind of fitness with white supremacy or racial ideology. An example of like how human beings have different fitness in different environments is, for example, how people with more melanin have an easier time surviving in a sunny climate because they are less likely to get sunburns and skin cancer. So you'd say that, like, of course, like people who are with more melanin naturally in their skin are more fit in that environment. That isn't saying that like they are the master race or the inferior race or subhuman or Ubermensch. So you're trying to conflate and equate these ideas, like racial supremacism, with like just stating facts about whether certain human beings would be able to survive and reproduce better in certain environments. Obviously, some ethnicities will be able to survive and reproduce better in certain environments. So that isn't the same as a racist or white supremacist ideology.
Okay. Let me just. Oh, sorry. Let me just say one thing. What you basically said there is a whitewashing, because you agree, sir. I didn't interrupt you. 1 second. You just agreed there's different types of fitnesses amongst human beings. Well, that's what that picture was showing.
No, I said in particular environments, different.
I agree.
Then why are you disagreeing with me?
No, what you're doing is
environments, different like ethnicities of human beings, or human beings with different genotypes are more fit than other human beings.
No, that's what the theory says.
Yes. So what's the problem here?
The problem is, number one, that's false. Because as Alfred Russel Wallace noticed, if you take a savage in that environment, you stick him in Cambridge, he becomes intelligent. So number one is false. Number two is inherently racist to believe that you have superior human beings. Two problems.
No, but like obviously, kind of believing that certain human beings are more fit in certain environments isn't saying that you have overall like a master race or ubermensch or superhuman beings. So there's a clear difference which you agree with, and then you.
Sir, the reality is
it's
this.
double think. It's
You are trying to put forward a face which does not exist of Darwinism.
I'm not,
Let's
I'm not
stick to
defending
Darwin
Darwinism.
himself.
I'm talking
Darwin
about
said,
modern biology.
the civilized races, and we know who they are,
I'm not
they are
defending
going to wipe out the savage
And I'm not
races.
defending that.
This is
So why are you
something,
talking
I know
about
you're not
it?
defending that. What I'm saying is natural selection cannot escape
No,
racism.
No, that's definitely wrong. Because the idea of natural selection, i.e. that's the core idea of how modern biologists understand natural selection is that kind of
Variation.
Organisms reproduce.
Variation.
Yes, and when they reproduce,
Variation.
there is variation.
So you have to have
population.
you have to have variation of different types of human beings.
Yeah, yes, there is variation. In
And
human beings, yes.
and different human subspecies.
No biologist would say that there are different human.
So hang on a second, sir.
No, do you
Wait,
know
hang on a second, hang on a second. Does speciation happen in human chimpanzee history?
What?
Does speciation?
That's
Fantastic. So now we're having speciation, but as soon as we have to human beings, no, there's no speciation here.
There's a reason for that, and the reason is because.
Come on, man.
The reason is because humans, if you look at all the humans on planet Earth, there is a far greater. There's more. Like so, that you can measure how closely related and how similar two human beings are genetically, and the way you do that is with what's called a genetic
Random scientific fact, as you normally do.
no.
That's a random scientific fact.
It's not.
It's
not-
just to make you sound clever.
it's not.
What we're speaking about this natural selection. Look, if I say this, gravity works every single place in this universe, except gravity doesn't work in Speaker's Corner. That's nonsense. That's nonsense. What you're saying is speciation happens in every creature, natural selection happens in every creature, human beings. No, not really.
Will you allow me to expose you on a very specific claim you made?
Do you know what you're doing right now? You're not only misrepresenting science, you're refuting Darwin. You're refuting Darwin. Sorry. Do you know you're refuting Darwin right now?
Fine, but like there's a good reason. No, please. There is a good reason why there is not, why biologists don't say that there is subspecies within humans.
Because
And the
it's
reason
politically incorrect to say that.
No.
And let me give you evidence
No,
for that.
you're just interrupting me
Let
again
me-
because you know I'm about to blow you the
Go on
fuck
then,
out
go on,
of the
go on then,
water.
go on
Okay,
then,
fine.
go
Will you
on.
not interrupt me?
Fine.
Okay. The reason is because when you look at other species, in particular chimpanzees, and you look at different populations within chimpanzees, you can find chimpanzees that are just on different sides of the mountain or separated by different streams, and the distance genetically between those two groups of chimpanzees is many, many times greater than the distance between human beings from the Pacific Islands to Europe. There is far less genetic distance, yes, between human beings than there is between most other species, in particular chimpanzees. Yes, different chimpanzee tribes that are only separated by a river have a greater genetic distance.
No, wait, don't interrupt him. Wait 1 second. Don't interrupt him. Carry on.
The reason human beings
No,
are very
wait,
silly
wait,
is
no, wait,
because
don't
they've,
interrupt him, 1 second.
There's less physical barriers, so the physical barriers like the river, for example, presents a much greater barrier towards reproducing and interbreeding for chimpanzees than it would for humans, because humans they explore, they just cross the river, they have wars, they spread out through the whole world very quickly compared to other animals, and so that's why it's nonsense, and no biologists believe that there's human subspecies. So I want you to take back the idea that biologists are only saying that there aren't human subspecies.
Okay,
For
okay.
reasons of political correctness.
Wait,
Will you
Abdullah.
take that back now?
Okay, sir. Sir, firstly, the genetic evidence you're talking about, it disproves an image like this.
Sure, but yeah,
Okay,
fine.
number 2, it's absolute nonsense to say no biologists today. because I'm going to give you.
Okay, fine. No, like,
Wait. You said no biologist today, and will you take that back?
Fine, maybe.
No, don't change your mind.
I'll take
Don't
that
change
back.
your mind. No.
Okay, I'll take that back.
First, you're going to get refuted.
No, but
First.
you said, you also
If I-
you need to take something back as well, because you said it was only because of political
No,
correctness. I'll take back
Sir.
that there is at least one biologist who says it.
Sir, you're too funny.
He's denounced by the rest
Who
of the
am I talking about?
I know, Richard Lynn probably, or some other...
Ah, that's another one.
but hold on. You said
Who
it was
else?
only
Who else?
You said it was
Who
only
else?
because of political correctness.
Who else?
Will you agree that it's not just because of political correctness?
No, I'm going to give you another evidence for that. Here you go. Douglas Whitman, the evolutionary and biological reality of race, American Renaissance, the alt-right.
That's not the same as subspecies, though,
Right.
necessarily.
No, in the talk, he says subspecies, and his name is Douglas Whitman. Okay, so, wait.
Does he have a publication in Nature? How many citations does he have of that view? He is not the mainstream consensus.
Sir,
he is denounced.
Sir,
and so,
sir.
but before you...
How is he
before you-
denounced when you didn't know he existed before?
Well, he's denounced by biologists. No, try and see.
So relax.
Try and see if he gets published.
Now you're just making fun of yourself.
No, I'm not.
You're saying he's been denounced, you don't even know who he is.
No, I believe he's been denounced. What's his name? Let's see whether he's been denounced or not.
Douglas
I
Whitman.
bet he will be.
Douglas Whitman. Now, I made a claim for which you challenged me, for which you have a right, and you wanted me to take it back. I will not take it back, but I'll give you evidence. And I'll give you evidence. I'll give you evidence. I'll give you evidence. I'll give you evidence. One second. One last thing. I'll give you evidence. Yuval Noah Harari, he's an Israeli science historian. He's written a very famous book which is all over the world, Sapiens. In that book, he says this, and you can refute me because it's all on video. He says, the white man being superior and the need to protect degeneration of the race, and the other human beings being lower. This is something which is scientifically accepted and published about and written about by the best Western universities. What changed this? 1 second, sir. What changed this, according to him, was not scientific data. What changed it was political and social realities.
Okay, but who is this guy? That's nonsense. That's not the mainstream biological consensus.
So wait, who is this guy? That's nonsense. Do you know that doesn't make any sense?
No,
You can't say who's the guy and it's nonsense. Either you know him or you don't know him.
Biological consensuses, and it's what I said. I gave the biological reason why biologists, the mainstream, well-established, well-published, well-supported biologists believe that there aren't subspecies within humans, and they have scientific reasons for that. And you're saying it's only because of political correctness.
So
That's
if an evolutionary biologist says there's human subspecies, is he false? Is he wrong? Yes or no?
Yeah, he's wrong. But
Okay, so if the evolutionary biologist says, I have come up with subspecies because this is the only thing that natural selection can produce,
then he's wrong.
then he's wrong about what?
He's wrong about his
Is it-
interpretation.
Of natural selection.
Interpretation
Oh,
of what subspecies should mean, interpretation of natural selection.
Okay,
He's wrong about
what if that
his moral
person,
beliefs.
what if that person is an evolutionary biologist and there's a hobo with a straw hat disagreeing with him on Sunday in Speaker's Corner?
Well, because there are many more other evolutionary
Come on,
biologists who also disagree with him. You're just cherry picking. Like the mainstream.
Go on.
The mainstream.
Go on.
So like for the guy who you mentioned before about.
Name me one biologist who says there's no speciation in the human line.
So like the author of Just Like a Whale, for example.
Right, go on.
The professor of evolution at UCL.
What does he say? What does he say?
Stephen Rose.
What did he say?
He disagreed with that.
Disagree with what?
Disagree with the idea that there are
There's
human
some-
subspecies, and what you said was that the white superior human being is better than the degenerate human
That's what
subspecies.
Darwin believed.
Okay, but we
And that's what even the-
defending Darwin's original beliefs.
Okay,
not
but
all of them.
okay, but
this is
do you
your
know
Oscar.
these beliefs were carried on to the 20th century?
Well, no, it's not the mainstream. It's denounced. It's denounced. by biologists.
Sir, would you
Oh,
agree
no.
it was the mainstream before World War II?
Still exists today.
Because that's what Yuval Noah Harari
Yeah,
says.
maybe.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, no, but
So
no,
now
yeah,
what
so
they've
it's not-
done is
so
this.
is World War
Now
II
there's
the
two
same as
problems.
today?
They
Is World War
realize
II
it's
the same as
false,
today?
and also they're trying to cover up up the past.
No, but that's not the mainstream science today. You're admitting it's 80 years out of date, and yet you just brought it up
No,
as though it's relevant today.
I brought it up to show that they're two-faced.
You just did it for
I
showboating.
brought it up to show that they have a hidden history which they're being inconsistent about. Because if natural selection applies to fruit flies, if speciation applies to fruit flies, it applies to human beings.
No, but
So
then
subhuman
I
species
explained
must
why
exist.
There aren't subspecies among humans. I explained that,
Do
and
they
I gave
believe
the
African
reason.
pygmies are subspecies?
Hey, good. Louder banger.
No, like all natural selection says is who can survive better in a particular environment. That's not being a master race. That's not being Uberman.
Okay, so let me ask you a question. Do you think it's a confirmation of Darwin's original idea that the majority of inherent in people who accept Darwinian evolution happen to be the same race that he thought was superior?
No, that's like obviously the first place that Darwin would spread his ideas is Europe, and so it would make sense that Europeans would be familiar with his ideas and adopt them first.
No, but I'm asking a different question. I'm saying hypothetically, if Darwin was right, that would make sense that colored people are more religious and less likely to believe in natural selection.
So you're saying if we assume that Darwin was right about black people being inferior, then
the fact that black people are more religious and less likely to accept the theory is a confirmation of his original hypothesis.
Yeah,
it would be. Yeah.
But there's plenty of other evidence against the idea that black people are
Can I
inferior.
give my evidence now?
Look, I agree with you. My point was.
So you wouldn't accept like kind of that particular belief
No,
of Darwin.
I'm not
so
saying.
It's not relevant today.
No, sir.
You're just bringing it up for emotional value. You're conducting a circus right
So
now.
what I'm saying is there's a whitewash. There's a whitewash going on.
No, it's not a whitewash. It's not relevant to science today. This isn't part of science.
When you say that's relevant today, I'm going to say what, please. I'm not finished, I'm just going to say, when you say that's relevant today, it's the biggest denial I ever heard.
I meant to say within the field of mainstream
Yeah,
science.
he did me.
He said today. When it's not relevant today, it's the biggest denial.
I misspoke.
Yes.
I admit that
and
I was
also
wrong to say
find that
that.
disrespect to every single black people today, especially those who forefather went through what they went.
Okay, I agree with what you're saying.
Hear my point now. You acknowledge today that there's white supremacist racists today.
There are.
And they're large in number from America to here. They're very large in number.
It depends what you mean by larger number, but
yes,
sure.
And most of these white supremacist racist people, they hold an evolutionary, the evolutionary belief. That's what they hold. Why is that coincidence? And today, every time a racist white person want to insult that person, what name do they use? They must say monkey most for a black man. They never say for a white man. Only monkey, black man, monkey. In Spain, the footballers, monkey.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's.
So today, you say today, if that's from Darwin theory, from Darwin time, that wrong belief, it's still alive today because it influenced that behavior today.